Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today. Our topic is how to build ready to scale connected products. My name is Jim Hassman. I'm going to be your host, and I am the President and Chief Revenue Officer of Blues. For those of you who this might be your first time taking a look at Blues, you may be wondering, what is Blues? What do you do? So I'll just provide a couple of overviews and then I'll introduce our guest and we'll jump into the topic. Let's see here. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Might be seeing. What is everyone seeing? Well, I'll just get through this quickly. Um, Blues is a hardware led SaaS company. We exist to help reduce complexity for companies that are trying to connect their products and turn those products into smart or intelligent services, typically associated with building new revenue streams. Um, Many of our customers are small to mid to very large size organizations who many of them have been building their products for many, many years, some of them over 100 years actually. And transforming these products into new services is a transformation for their business. It is very transformative, and so we exist to reduce the complexity of all of the things that it takes to actually connect a product. And we've tried to make it as easy as the bottom sentence you see on the slide here, that provisioning a device, communications on the device, security on the device, updating the device, it all just works and it works at scale. Um, so that's why Blues exists. Um, in our hardware side of our business, we have these little modules here that we call note cards. We have cellular Wi-Fi. We have satellite. In fact, if you didn't see the news this week, we just announced a new satellite card that uses Iridium. The one you see on the screen here uses a backhaul called Skylo, but we have two versions of satellite note cards now. We have LoRa cards, Wi-Fi cards. You'll see the connector on the bottom of those cards is all the same. It makes it really easy to swap out radios in your device without having to change your device design or change your code, which is really, really cool. So it's a multi-radio technology, and there's a lot of features packed into the note card. Some of the features that tend to be the favorites of our customers are the fact that the cellular note card comes with cellular data included. It comes with 500 megabytes for 10 years. And if a device happens to run out of that, you can enable the note card to have it topped up with another 500 megabytes for another 10 years automatically. And so you don't have to worry about modems. You don't have to worry about SIMs. You don't have to worry about key insert management. You don't have to worry about how is power modulated and regulated onto the note card in your device. You can do firmware updates to these devices and even to your own host microcontroller. And so really the whole design of the Note card and its companion product, the Note Hub, which is our cloud client, they're architected as as a tightly integrated system. So think of Note card and Note Hub as a system, not as individual products that you buy. They were designed to work in orchestration with each other. Customers use Note Hub to manage their fleets of note card based devices, to do firmware updates across those devices, to understand the device's behavior and health. And most importantly, to do what everybody wants is everybody wants their data, and Note Hub is the tool that allows you to route, or as some people say, pump data from your device to your in cloud application where the value to your customer is actually created. So that is what Blues provides. Um, I'll introduce our guest speaker now. His name is David McKenzie from Prodigy. Um, and I'll just say one thing about Prodigy, and then I'll let Dave introduce himself. Prodigy is one of our partners that helps customers that want to use Blues in their products design and manufacture their products. Blues is in the structure of our business, we can't build all of the finished products for our customers. And so we rely on partners like Prodigy to help our customers actually think through their design, build it out, and pilot it, take it to scale, which will be today's topic. So, David, I'll let you introduce yourself and then we'll get into the meat of the topic.
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm David McKenzie. I'm the Vice President of Product Development for Prodigy. So we are a product development services firm. So we partner with our clients to develop products, whether that's a sippy cup or a large can making machine, a really wide variety. We've been in business about 38 years. We're located in Cincinnati, Ohio, and um, yeah, that's a little about us. My background is mechanical engineering, but over the years, I've drifted more into the solving things with technology, solving problems and challenges, and that's where IoT entered into our business.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking time out of your day to join us on this conversation. The topic that we want to cover, I mentioned in the beginning, is how to build ready to scale connected products. And when Blues was creating its architecture, this was kind of always at the forefront of our what we call our design center. We wanted to build a embedded piece of hardware that was already cloud connected from the start, that was scale ready, hyperscale ready, meaning we'd already thought through the security aspects. We had already thought through, um, things like data encryption and off internet data transfer protocols,
Mhm.
and how you manage large fleets of devices. Um, with your background, David, in designing and building solutions for customers, can you tell us a little bit about like Prodigy's journey, and how it's evolved over time to focus on connected products?
Sure. So we've probably done connected or products that share data, for decades. But generally, that was, within four walls. Generally, it was using a wire or sometimes Wi-Fi. But it really was in the early 2010s. For me specifically, it was about 2014 where, IoT, which by the way, for the audience, was actually coined here in Cincinnati by a gentleman at Procter and Gamble named I forget, Kevin Aston or something like that. Anyway, but for me, it was I read an article in part of the journey was I read an article in Wired magazine about, it was actually a kid's toy. They were called Little Bits. They're these little electronic components that, you can learn in STEM classes and make designs. And they had one called a Cloud Bit, which, had a Wi-Fi connector, and I made a demo where I pressed a button simulating maybe on a machine, and it would route data to a Google Docs spreadsheet and to create a Trello card and so forth. But really, that's the kind of thing. And then when we first started working with clients with this, there were a lot of different technologies. Blues didn't exist yet, so we worked with a variety, geez, like hologram, telet, particle, Nimbus, maybe. There were a whole bunch of these modems that existed, but to get them into a product and get them certified and do all, you could buy a cellular modem, but the cost, especially for mid-sized company, to get an FCC certification to communicate via cellular is at least 300K. So, a solution like Blues, when that came along, was really kind of a no-brainer for us. Um, I'd heard about Blues. I think you were founded what, like 2019?
Yeah,
It
something like
was it was then, and I didn't know the founder was Ray Ozzie, but I had always gravitated to some of the solutions that he had brought to the world. Everything from Lotus Notes, Groove Networks I used early on in my career here at Prodigy, and when I saw that he had created this kind of IoT in a box communication module, we were very intrigued, and it ended up serving multiple purposes for us. Everything from a one-off pilot to get up quickly to scalable solutions. And like Jim said, they've kind of solved the majority of the headache in this space where, if I include this modem in my electromechanical device, I still may have to get UL or CE certification. That doesn't change, but I don't have to go through the extensive and very expensive FCC and other. And then I'm sure we'll talk about later or mention the fact that it works in over 130 countries um, is something you could never do on your own. I mean, unless you are a giant Fortune 100 company, negotiating. I mean, how many telecoms there are. So our solutions that we develop now can work locally or they can work globally. And like Jim said, the ability for us not to have to change our firmware. If I want to go from cellular to Wi-Fi or LoRa, um, we don't have to change a thing except swap out the card. So that's that's kind of how we got here. I mean, technology that works for our clients is what um, happened. So
The I think it was about 2 years ago we started talking about the multi-radio access capability of these note cards in the market, and we had a customer in the UK that built a demo of a air quality monitor with one of their operating companies. And in the demo, they actually like had the back of the device open, and they were swapping cards and seeing on the application the change from cellular to Wi-Fi to LoRa um, and satellite throughout their demo. It was really powerful for me to sit there and see that a customer had actually done this. And
yeah,
somebody might think like, well, I would never do that in reality. I would never just sit there and swap cards. And that
not true.
wasn't the point. The point was that they were making was they could actually focus on the design of their product and worry about the radio later, depending on where the product was going to be deployed on planet Earth. They didn't have to design around, we selected this specific radio and this specific modem and we're using these AT commands or whatever. Like they were not limited by the radio itself. They could actually design a product that could work anywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of like the internet. I mean, you don't have to think about it. You pick a supplier and you have a connection, and this is becoming closer and closer to that type of reality. And even since 2019, we've seen, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, about different types of costs and data has just come down so much. It's not, when we talk about ROI and things like that, yes, the cellular data, you have to account for it and plan for it, of course, especially if you're in tens of thousands of devices. But even 5 years ago, that could be hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month, where today it's can be dollars a month.
Yeah.
And certain applications, of course, we're not talking about telemetry from a jumbo jet in real time streaming across cellular. We're talking about real world. Sometimes it's once an hour, sometimes it's once every 5 seconds. It really depends on your application. Um, and that 5 megabyte or 500 doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. I mean, we have devices or clients have products out there that are sending data all day, every day, and their storage costs and things are minimal. One of our clients, I was just looking at their dashboard, they've had 2.8 million um, payloads this month from their machines globally, and the storage of that adds up to like 900 megabytes, which if you look at cloud storage costs is nothing. That's pennies. If you're using the big three, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, and so forth.
Yeah, that really is a small footprint, and a lot of it's due to what happens to data that are coming off the devices as JSON payloads, the compression that occurs, the encryption and stuff that's already all built in when you use this stuff. On this topic of like building um, production ready or scale ready solutions, you've been doing this quite a while. I've been an enterprise software guy most of my career, so you've got a lot more experience building solutions than I do. What, in your experience, are like the biggest hurdles that you've seen that companies hit when they're working through this phase of like they've built a prototype, they've 3D printed it or whatever they've done, they've got it working, it works in a series of one or two, we got a couple of these things working, and now they're ready to go into this pilot phase and they hit a wall. Like, what are the biggest things that you see there that people run into, and how can they maybe obfuscate or avoid those?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of pilots where maybe you start off using like a Raspberry Pi or um, something like that, and then when you want to go scale or the next step, you really need a custom board because perhaps the Raspberry Pi is even too expensive. You don't need, a $50, um, you know, single board computer. That's why we developed our own kind of single board computer. We don't sell it, but we've designed it just for the purposes of pilots. We've put on different connectors, ability to speak Modbus, the ability to control, brushless motors and a wide variety of other applications. And so when it comes time to do the pilot, we can ready this device. And of course, it has the plug-in for the Blues card right here. And that's scalable kind of from the get-go, really. I mean, um, yes, you may have to redesign the board to fit and take off, remove components that you don't use and things like that. But that's a big help. But it's not just technology that's the challenge when you're moving into a pilot. It's really knowing what is the problem you're trying to solve, or what is the business ROI or value of what you're trying to do. I mean, honestly, technically, with the state of technology today and these IoT platforms where I can quickly build a dashboard and then scale it up to thousands of users, almost you know, not instantly, but in days and weeks, not months and years. Um, you can start a pilot with a scalable design. I mean, we're talking about the Blues card today. I mean, I'm using it in the pilot. I know it works. If I need to, when I scale up, it's going to work. We know that from experience. So it's less about, you know, breadboard, silly things that, have wires sticking out all over the place and so forth. Um, so that really helps.
Yeah, you mentioned one about the business case, and I can definitely say that I underestimated this piece of reasons why people don't get to the scale. In that a lot of companies that I saw early on when I've been at Blues almost 4 years now would get super excited about, hey, this is easier than what I've been trying in the past. I'll give it a shot. And so they get a Blues dev kit, they try it out, and they're like, man, this is awesome. And then they start going through the process of building their product. And it took me a while to realize, like, why are these things taking so long if Blues has made it easier?
Right.
Turns
Yeah,
out
it
that
seems, yeah.
it turns out that a lot of these projects, they kind of skipped important pieces of the business case planning and even pieces of what it would take to actually launch the product commercially after their pilot was successful. And so they would jump into the product build and try to get to pilot, and they get through this and like the data are singing through, the device is working, it works in the environment it's designed to, and then someone steps back and says, how are we going to make money at this? So um, I really think that in order to have a scale ready product, you cannot overemphasize how important the business case planning. What is your hypothesis of the value creation? How is the value going to be captured? And what are the 100 things that somebody's going to need to be ready to do to actually launch that thing into market? I'm watching a customer right now who has this amazing product, and they went through pilots, everything was working great, and they realized two things at the end of the pilot. Number one, the installation process of the device was pretty cumbersome and clunky. And they never wrote installation requirements as part of their product design. They just wrote
Mhm.
a product spec and built it and didn't think like, okay, how much time is this going to take for a technician? How complex is this going to be for a technician to learn how to install it? And so now they're going back and like doing a quick redesign to try to make that easier. But these are little things that actually add time and no value. Like there's not a, if they can be caught early, you get the value of not wasting time, right? So, um, how do you see the connectivity requirements change in these projects as somebody moves from prototype to pilot? Do you see changes in connectivity requirements as people move through those phases?
Yeah, it's really no different than just general product development, which we do every day. Is there's a tendency of engineers, whatever, to just want to start building and hacking and doing, but that often results, in those delays because you're not, number one, you're not involving the entire organization. I mean, it's not the IT department that's necessarily going to benefit. Hopefully, it's your customers, obviously, or if it's internal, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to be more efficient and so forth? So we'd already talked about, the fragmentation of prototypes, but being able to, use things that are scalable. But there's other realities in organizations. One of the biggest is supply chain. We did a pilot right around COVID time, and everything, technically was great, but hey, let's go into production. Well, we need 1,000. We think we're going to sell 1,000 of these things a year. Guess what? We can't secure 1,000 modems, without waiting 6 months. So that's a huge delay. Um, the 50 unit scale to 5,000, connectivity at scale, right? You might have 10 devices that work well in the lab. There's manufacturing considerations. If you're retrofitting and you're not necessarily an IoT module familiar type of entity, you're going to have to figure out how do we get these things in, flash the programming on them, get them. And then, like you said, um, um, deploying. I mean, we've had that situation. We did a device, which I can just flash up here really quickly, that was deployed in utility and energy sector, and this device would read um, data off a meter, electrical meter. And one of the things we designed was just a simple QR code that the service technician could take their phone out, whether Android or whatever, and just scan the barcode, and then they could provision the device with a simple form that appears, and it automatically got their location from GPS because their phone has that, and so forth. So there are ways that have to be thought through of especially deployment. It's a big deal because it's very easy for a bunch of engineers to envision something happening, and but it's a lot different when you're expecting people who may not have that capability. They might not speak or read English, and so forth. So you've got to anticipate where are these things being deployed, and so forth. So yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of product specs in my day, but rarely have they been accompanied with at the same time an installation spec because
Right.
people jump in and build the product and maybe assume, for better or for worse, assume that the installation process is it'll be what it'll be, but it is actually something that should be thought through early, even if it's just the here's the concept of the installation experience that we want to achieve as we build this product, because you may not know everything in the beginning. um,
Yeah.
what are some maybe some stories you could share about customers that are going through this prototype to pilot transition? Maybe a really positive story, and then maybe one that didn't turn out so well that there was a really valuable learning from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can start with positive, I think is best. I mean, most are positive. And the less than positive are rarely ever technical reasons. Like, oh no, this just absolutely doesn't work. I mean, it works, you know. Now, what data you want to collect from your device or machine or whatever, that's important. But more importantly is what are you trying to do? We have clients that want to create new business models, right? We want a subscription model where you can get your data and you can do things with it, or maybe it's just for emergencies. We have a client that does like wheelchair lifts in the home that go up 2 stories, and maybe the application is simply, we want to know, if my grandparents haven't used the lift in 24 hours, there's something wrong because they use it every day to go upstairs and downstairs and so forth. Um, so yeah, and a lot of the less than positive are really around business and operations, the ROI, and not having a clear vision of exactly what it is you're trying to solve. I mean, the engineering team and technical team can surmise, but unless you involve like field sales, maintenance, and those types of people, that really um, can slow things down. One of our customers, um, Harmar, makes these lifts, and one of the things they're trying to do is reduce um, field service. Often it's just a simple thing, or someone doesn't understand something and they have to drive out there. And often these locations are not, right down the street. And being able to use, IoT technology, um, because it's two-way, like you talked about, it's not just firmware of the Blues note card. We use the Blues note card as a conduit to update the firmware that we have written. And that's not just the firmware, sometimes it's the user interface. One of our largest deployments is a company called ColdJet, and they're the world's largest manufacturer of dry ice blasting machines. So they're about the size, I don't know, of like a hot dog cart you'd see in New York City on the street, maybe a little bit smaller, but they're in very dirty, remote, crazy environments, cleaning things like injection molds, um, bridges, cleaning all the rust, these big, big operations, and so forth. Um, One of the interesting things, though, about ROI that you really have to do, but sometimes you're going to discover things that you didn't think about. So when Coaljet launched their blaster, they had an event in a big auditorium, and they had dealers in and key customers and so forth. And they presented this new Connect product that allowed them to give them, all these capabilities, preventive maintenance and, you know, firmware updates and so forth. But one of the contractors raised his hand and said, well, that's interesting. So I can record if I have a huge job, let's say it's a bridge, I can have all the data of every operation, every time they pulled the trigger to clean something, what were the settings, how long did the operator hold the trigger while he or she were cleaning, and so on. And he said, well, that would be an excellent quoting mechanism, which would really reduce my time on similar jobs. I would just have to bring up, the data or the footprint of a previous job. And that was really something no one really had thought of. It was just somebody seeing, here's this capability, and then somebody in their head saying, you know what, I could do a lot of things with this, you know.
I can't think of a pilot that I have been exposed to in the last 4 years where a company didn't find additional value levers that they
Right.
didn't anticipate during the pilot. Like it's almost a byproduct of setting a pilot up correctly, is you are likely to find things that may be of even greater value than your original hypothesis.
Yes.
Um,
And there's a future proofing too. I mean, Coljet has been collecting operational data for 6, 7 years now. And there's new technologies. I'm required by law to say the word AI, but there are new technologies like AI that you can look at historical data and find new insights. It can help you act, if you have millions and they have millions and millions of records in a database. Like I mentioned, there are 2.8 million so far this month that's collected, that's used in their apps, but you have that data and you'll have that forever. And being able to, you know, get key insights, is pretty amazing. I mean, 5 years ago, AI was literally the stuff of science fiction. I mean, to most of the world,
yeah.
where today it's we're all using it every day, even writing code with it and then just generating ROI documents with it. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I was part of a AI company for 12 years before I joined Blues. And so I've told this story before, but when I came to Blues, I was basically entering this space of IoT, having been in AI, and I'm like this one fish swimming this way.
Yeah.
Everybody else is swimming into the AI space. But I can sit here and tell the audience that the AI wave, especially the Gen AI wave, has created the largest tailwind I think that the IoT industry has seen in the last 14, 15 years of maybe even projects that had been attempted before and didn't make it over the finish line for whatever reason might in many cases be restarted now because of what is now possible and easier to do than it was before with AI, to create these new value streams. So AI is the tailwind right now that's driving
Mhm.
so many products to now become connected for the first time.
Yeah,
Um,
I know it's not part of the seminar today, but real quick, I mean, the ability to do edge computing with AI to streamline operations locally before you're transmitting data and makes a lot of these projects, highly more feasible today. So yeah.
yeah, many of our projects use both edge and cloud compute in
Mhm.
or we've held other webinars and sessions on that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
definitely a theme right now that's occurring. Um, Maybe with the little bit of time that we have left, um, as you think about your clients that go through this process and they go through a pilot, what advice would you have for them as they are either entering pilot or exiting pilot that would help ensure their success in actually achieving production scale and commercial launch of their product? There's a lot of pilots that go on out there, and some of them don't ever make it into commercialization. What advice would you have for the audience here?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be anything surprising or game changing, but it's really the basics of most things you do in product development, designing for scale early. When we design products, we before we start, engineering and doing CAD and writing firmware, we're designing system diagrams and how things are going to go together and trying to fit that out. Well, like we talked about, when you go to the initial pilot, try to use building blocks that will scale. If you're not going to use a Raspberry Pi, well, don't pilot with that. Pilot with something more analogous to what you want to do with. It's really not that much more expensive to do, and in the long run, it'll save on your design costs. Um, think about security. You called it the data pump or the data pipeline. Think about that early on, because that becomes an issue. But again, with something like Blues, that's already taken care of for you. That data is encrypted in transmit for you. Consider regulatory things early on. Where am I going to have to, not just governmental, but your customers, like Rampack was one of our pilots. They make packaging machinery that goes inside Amazon. Well, they originally thought we'll just do Wi-Fi and we'll connect to their Wi-Fi. Well, no, you won't. They're not allowed to. They have to use cellular. And then the last kind of main thing is just that cross-functional collaboration. And I don't, if you're making a sippy cup or an IoT connected device, aligning engineering, let's see, product operations, procurement, sales, marketing, manufacturing, um, even in the pilot phase, it is going to save you um, a lot of time later. Um, you know, and even if you're trying to do a skunkworks type project, I mean, as soon as you can get to the sea level and what are you doing, why are you doing it, and that especially if it's a bottoms up type of thing. Um, yeah, and another thing that's often, this is my real last thing, is the user experience. I mean, the user is the most important person in the scenario. If it's a customer facing IoT, even if it's internal, if your internal people are the maintenance or support people on the phones every day, external, if it's your clients, I mean, that's highly, involving them. Hey, use this. Here's a dashboard. This is what we're doing. Do you mind participating? You'll rarely find someone that says no, especially in this space. So, that's really, some of my 2 cents.
Great. I appreciate you sharing that. We'll kind of do question and answers. There's a couple in the chat that have been entered. One of the questions was, I currently use an Intel NUC for my client software, the receiver for my data delivery platform. Would be awesome to add a RF module for wireless connectivity. Are you saying this is just a JSON API call to receive the demoed IQ data to be ingested into my software? Um, there's a lot packed in there, but let me just kind of give just a quick overview of what actually happens when you embed this into your product. This note card here is a cellular plus Wi-Fi note card, but the concept is all the same. You're going to have your own PCB that you've designed for your product. It will likely have some type of host microcontroller MCU. This is our dev kit, so this is our dev kit version of the PCB and the host MCU. But when you add the note card to your design, it just goes into a simple M2 connector. You're going to give your device some type of power source. It might be battery, it might be solar, it might be mains power, and you're going to connect sensors to your device that and firmware onto your host microcontroller. And so once the device is alive, those sensors are going to be collecting data at whatever frequency you have codified them to collect it in based on your firmware. And the data are going to be captured as JSON data payloads onto the note card. And then you're going to be able to configure how often you want the note card to package these things up. They get compressed, they get encrypted, and it's going to send that data as an encrypted, compressed JSON payload over private VPN tunnel using TLS to NoteHub. And those data are going to land in NoteHub in your environment, in your NoteHub account. Okay. And in NoteHub, you can set up where you want the data to be routed. So in your case, if you've got this um, existing platform where you collect data, you're simply going to create a route, what we call a route in NoteHub, and you're going to set up how often you want that route to run with the data that's arrived. And so you can think of the note card in NoteHub as a data pump from your device. It's going to collect the data, it's going to pump it to NoteHub, and from there you can route it on to its final destination. But it is all JSON and JSON based APIs. Anything you would add, David, on that?
No, I mean it's very simple once you see it, and like Jim mentioned, it's very simple to route it. Like we have a project where we just route it to Google Cloud, their MQT, they call it PubSub, but it's MQTT protocol, which is fantastic because anyone who has the credentials can subscribe to that. So often our clients, the data is going to their apps, but as we're working with them, we subscribe to that same feed and we have the data coming here so we can troubleshoot and do things. There's just so much you can do. Um, and it seems complex at first, you're dealing with more than one cloud always. But once you have them connected, it just runs. I mean,
Yep.
yeah.
I actually saw another question. Can you share an end-to-end description from note card to the cloud service? I think I just answered that in answering the other question. There's a question on, do we have a red cap solution? We do not have a red cap solution in market today. It is an active discussion. It's an interesting um, new capability. There's definitely some things that to be gained from red cap, and there's this conversation around red cap. There's pricing that's associated with these technologies that in certain types of solutions will break the economic model of the solution itself. And so we're very plugged into that discussion. I'll let our product people speak to our product roadmap as it relates to red cap. I'm not going to do that here today, but just know everybody that we are definitely plugged into that conversation. Um, and maybe just in final words, we've got 4 minutes here. Um, I'll just say that, you know, blues is the business model of blues is designed to constantly attempt to reduce the hardware costs for product development companies. And what I mean by that is that the note cards themselves have ways to be cost optimized. Okay. And our cloud service, the more you put through it, the cheaper it is to use it. So our business model is predicated on a very low margin module business. We don't get a lot of margin on the note cards because we wanted that to be something that developers would not look at and say, oh, this is really good for prototyping and for my pilot. But as I start to scale, I'm going to redesign all this because the economics don't work. We want the interpretation of our product to be, it's really good for prototyping and piloting, and it's priced such and designed such that the security, the architecture is amazing to scale with. Like there's no reason we would want to design this out. So that was our hypothesis of creating that piece of the business. And then the cloud service is a usage based service. So if you're pumping a little data through it, there may be no charge or very little charge to use the entire NoteHub platform. You get all the things I mentioned earlier. If you're pumping a lot of data through it, you're only being charged for what you're pushing through the system and you get access to all the features. And we have a really cool roadmap of things that will be coming out in the next year that we'll be announcing related to NoteHub and additional services on top of NoteHub.
Yeah,
Um,
and from a partner perspective, I mean, Blues, we talked about earlier, why did you select Blues? Of course, it's the technology and the value, but there's more to it. I mean, I mentioned Ray Ozzie and his philosophies about making things developer friendly is one of the key phrases that I use. My electrical team that does the firmware programming, they just don't have to waste time with crazy, proprietary SDKs. I mean, it's as easy as working with the modem and being able to swap out, and we can focus on our solution. And their whole and when we do pilots, I mean, Blues is a very customer oriented, and we as a partner have access to Jim and his leadership team, Brandon and others to get questions and get answers on the future and things like that. So that's also a part of why a partnership works well. So
Great. Well, thank you, David, for your time today. I guess just
sure.
in closing remarks, as your host here, everybody, if you have questions about the Blues Note Card or Note Hub, we will be following up with an email to everybody who registered for this event. Feel free to respond to that. You can go to the website and click on the contact me. You can send me an email at jim.hassman@blues.com. Um, and then if you have questions around doing product design and thinking through a product concept, David is available for any of you guys to talk to as well. If you're interested in trying out the Blues product, just to see what it's like, you can actually get one of these little dev kits on the website. I think they're $90, $99, something like that. Should arrive to most locations in 2 days. And the quick start guide, it comes with a QR code. You scan that. There's a quick start process where it kind of walks you through getting familiar with the note card and actually getting your first set of data flowing to the cloud. The note card has a temperature sensor built into it. It's got a GPS and accelerometer. So you get a few pieces of data from the note card itself without adding any additional sensors in your first experience. Feel free to do that. A lot of people around the world have one of these sitting on their desk. So that would be my invite.
Well,
Again, thank you everybody. And thank you, David, again for your time. And we'll
thank you.
call that a wrap.